Let's build a super simple mud farm that will also act as a concrete converter. So if you ever need to convert concrete or create some mud, you will be able to get that done. Best of all, this is fully AFK. You can just prop something on your mine button or use a rubber band to hold it down. We even have a dropper to feed us the item that we're converting. That way we never run out and can just keep placing this AFK until our cube maker is totally full. Now the cube maker will fill up in about 13 minutes. So unless you have some sort of TNT harvester that you would like to add, you can only AFK this for 13 minutes at a time. But that will give you enough mud or concrete to fill up an entire shulker box. The total build area is going to be 19 by 26, including the cube maker. But keep in mind that you probably want some clearance room around the cube maker so that you don't accidentally mine out the walls or something like that. The section that converts concrete or creates mud is only 7 by 10, dug down 1 on the back 5 rows. We're going to start off 3 from the front, 3 from the back, and 4 from the right side, and we're going to place a dispenser that is facing toward the cube maker. Make sure that is a dispenser. Then place a hopper pointed into the back of the dispenser, a solid block next to that with a comparator on top, and a repeater pointed into it. Then we want 2 solid blocks above this repeater with a torch on the side of the back one. Then 4 dust in these positions. Now we want a hopper that is pointed at that comparator. You could always replace the comparator with a temporary block if it's hard to place that hopper pointed toward it. But inside of this hopper, we want 4 glass bottles in the last 4 slots, and then 19 glass bottles in the first slot. So one of the bottles will fall through, leaving you with 18 in the first slot, and 1 bottle trapped in this bottom hopper down here. On top of this hopper, we want to place a dispenser facing toward the front. Then next to that, we want an observer that is facing the same direction. Then 3 solid blocks behind and on top of these, with redstone dust on top. Then diagonally down from the observer, we want 2 solid blocks with dust on top, like so. Then we want a piston facing back toward the dispenser and observer next to that second dust. Now we need to dig down 1 so that we can place an observer looking up at that piston. So the face of the observer is pressed right up against the bottom of the piston. But now we want a torch on the side of the observer with 4 dust going from under the observer over there next to that hopper. Now if you can't place dust in this hole, you could just loop the dust around the hole. That would be fine. If you're building this, on top of something and don't have clearance. We just want dust going from that observer pointed into a solid block that is next to that dispenser. Then 3 blocks away from this dispenser, we're going to place a pack ice with a button on top next to a soul sand. Then we want to surround this in solid blocks to create a canal from the dispenser to the soul sand. Place water next to the dispenser so it flows toward the button, and cover the water and the button in either glass or blocks. Now I like using glass so I can see the items going through to make sure everything is working properly, but you can use glass or solid blocks. But then we want to go up by 2 surrounding this soul sand so that we can place 3 buckets of water above it to create a bubble column. Now I want a hopper pointed into that dispenser, then 2 blocks next to that hopper in that hole, and we want to create a canal that goes from the bubble column to the hopper. So just diagonally up, surrounded, so that we can place a bucket of water up here that will flow over to that hopper. Then we just want a block above the bubble column to stop the items from shooting up into the sky, and this is it. But before we start using it, we need to place 9 water bottles inside of this dispenser. So we need to fill it completely up with bottles of water. And then the hopper that is pointed into that dispenser also needs to be full. So we need a total of 14 water bottles. But now place a dirt in front of the dispenser, then place one in front of the observer, and it should convert the first one into mud. Now come over here on top of this dust. This is where we're going to AFK the farm. So stare directly at the top of that torch and hold down the mine button until the row is full and the piston stops moving. Then go over to the end and you will have one block at the end of your mud that used to be a part of your bubble elevator. So be sure never to break out this block or it'll spill water on the floor. But go ahead and break out this block, and diagonally back from where it used to be, we're going to place a solid block with a torch on the front side, then a piston on the top facing toward the mud, 2 solid blocks down here with dust on top. And that piston will activate and push the final mud out of the way. So then come back over here and continue placing dirt until the piston stops once again, saying that it is completely full of mud or dirt. Then come down here on the very last one, and we need 11 pistons underneath where this mud is. So it will stop right here 1 block away from the original line. Then we want solid blocks next to these pistons with redstone dust on top. At the end of this row, we want to place 2 blocks with a repeater that is aiming at the mud, being powered by a lever. And when you turn that lever on, the pistons will push that row up. Now I want to decide how tall we want our cube maker to be. At the max size, it will be 12 pistons tall. But you don't have to make it that tall. Like, we can only mine out 7 blocks from our feet to above our head. So if you want, you could just make this 7 pistons tall so that the cube is easier to mine. You know, if you make it the full size, you will be able to get more mud or concrete per AFK session, but you will also have to mine it out from the top down. It's really up to personal preference, whether you want to maximize the total volume or make it easy to harvest. Either way, above this dust, we want to place the first piston. Then we can place up to 11 more on top of that. And we want this entire wall of pistons to be aligned with the bottom ones. So it will be 11 pistons wide and up to 12 pistons tall. Again, I would either recommend making this 11 by 12 for the full size, or making it 11 by 7 to make it easier to harvest. But either way, we want a row of solid blocks aligned with the bottommost row of pistons with dust on top. And we're just going to alternate between blocks and dust going all the way up. Now once you get to the top row of pistons is either going to be aligned with the dust, or it's going to be aligned with the blocks that have dust on top, depending on if you have an even or odd number of pistons. So if it's aligned with the blocks, those blocks still need to have dust on top of them in order to power those blocks and power the pistons. Diagonally from this topmost corner piston, we need a wall, any kind of wall. And we want to have an observer looking at this wall aligned with the pistons, with a solid block behind that observer and a temporary lever on this block. Turn that lever on because we need to make sure the observer can power all of the dust. Also, if you have an odd number of pistons, you will need to have a dust on top of that block in order for the dust to be powered. But now we're just going to build diagonally down so that we can connect all of this dust together. So just build diagonally down out of blocks, place dust on all of this so that all of the dust is connected. Now go and see where the dust dies out. If you made the max size version, it will die out on that second row. So on the block, one block before where that row connects, we want to place a repeater right here, so next to the third row, going into a solid block. So the repeater will power that block, refreshing the signal, and so now all of the dust will be active. And so all of these pistons should be extended. And if they are, go ahead and break out that lever And that's it. The cube maker is now complete. So as blocks move next to that wall, the observer will notice the wall connecting to them, which will then activate that entire section of pistons. We will, of course, need some kind of floor for us to stand on. And I would recommend making this out of something that is not easy to mine with a shovel or a pick, such as wood. Make you a wooden floor so that you don't accidentally mine it out. But we don't want to place anything above those pistons right there, or they'll move the floor. But we might want to protect our repeater and our dust and our lever. So maybe place some blocks above the dust and the repeater and the torch and the piston, so that we don't accidentally mine it out as we're harvesting our cube. That is kind of the thing about cube makers, is I tend to accidentally break some of it as I'm mining out the cube. But that's it. Build you a floor, maybe make a way to get to the top with like a staircase or a ladder or something. But there are a few more things we can add, such as the section that will automatically feed us blocks. Because we wouldn't want this to be limited to just a single stack at a time. We want it to give us more blocks, so that we never run out of blocks until the cube is full. We need to place a dropper right here next to that block, facing toward the piston, with a hopper pointed into that dropper, with a chest or barrel on top. Now there's no real point in using a double chest, since a full-size cube is only a single chest or single shulker's worth. But now we can just load in whatever block that we're converting, and as we stand in our AFK spot and place blocks, the dropper will give us more of that block. So when we're using this, we only want to have one stack of the item that we're converting in our hotbar, so that the items we pick up from the dropper instantly stack into that slot, so that we never run out of blocks. If we want to use this to convert concrete, we need a water source that is closer to the piston. So next to the block in front of the observer, we're going to build a little bucket to hold some water. So now, whenever we place in concrete powder in front of the piston, it will get turned into concrete as it gets pushed next to that water. Now there's not really a simple way for us to automate the dropper part, for it to switch what blocks it's giving us. So instead, just do that by hand. Whenever you switch what you're converting, just switch the item out in the dropper. When switching back and forth between concrete and mud, we will need to break and replace the dust up there. Because when we're making concrete, we don't want the water bottle dispenser to be activating. So if we don't break that dust, the water bottle dispenser will be dropping its bottles on the floor, and we'll run out of our 14 bottles. To pick them up, we just go to this corner and we'll pick them up because they're kind of stuck inside of the dispenser. Then we can just replace them back into this hopper to fill back up the system, if we forget. So the way that we prevent this is when we want to switch to concrete mode, we place a single concrete and then break that dust. And when we want to switch back to mud, we place a single dirt and then replace that dust. So either way, anytime that you switch between concrete and mud, you place a single one of the one you're changing to, and then either break or replace the dust. So from mud to concrete, we place a single concrete, then break the dust. To go back to mud, we place a single dirt, then replace that dust. Now when switching back to concrete mode, if we break that dust before we place in a concrete, then all that happens is that dirt gets skipped. One dirt just won't get converted to mud because the dispenser was deactivated before it got converted. But adversely, if we place that dust before we place in a dirt, it will waste one water bottle. One water bottle will activate with the concrete in front of the dispenser. So we'll need to go pick up that water bottle and replace it into the system. Now also, this hopper may be missing water bottles, but those will be located in this dispenser down here. So if you think any bottles are missing, they might be down here inside of this dispenser. It's also worth noting that if you want to make tons of mud, but you think that dirt is expensive, you can essentially turn gravel into dirt by crafting coarse dirt. Coarse dirt is 50% gravel and can be converted to mud. You know, some people think that dirt is expensive, while other people think gravel is expensive. So it's just an option to know and to keep in mind. Now, if you are using coarse dirt, be sure that the dropper that is feeding you is also full of coarse dirt, since it can't stack with regular dirt. Gravel is just super easy to farm in mass amounts, using a gold farm and a piggy trader, whereas dirt is just not as easy to farm in mass amounts. But it's also super common and easy to collect, so it really comes down to play style. Like, I know some people who use mass amounts of dirt, creating fake islands and floating islands, but they never terraform. So like, dirt is a luxury to those people. Whereas people like me, I dig in the dirt all the time, so I'm always drowning in it. You know, I would never need to convert gravel into dirt. But let me know about your playstyle and how much dirt you have at any given time. Do you have chest monsters completely full of dirt at all times? Or can you just never seem to get enough? I'm super curious and would love to know. But that's all we got for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, share, and subscribe. Always remember that you are totally awesome, but above all, don't forget to have fun. Bye-bye.